I'll say right here, right now, there's no way I could ever hate my family. I can't do it. There's no way that I could do that and still consider myself a follower of Christ. Jesus' command to us seems inappropriate and in some ways offensive. But we need to understand the context. Remember the very first line of today's gospel. A great crowd is following him. And for the past few weeks, we've been listening to how Jesus has challenged that crowd. He's begun to ask them some very serious questions because he wants them to know that the path is narrow, remember? Their need is to be humble, and that there are choices along the way that are going to be difficult, and crosses that must be carried. It doesn't dissuade the people. The crowd keeps following him. But he wants them to think seriously. Do they have the resources to finish what they've begun? Do they have the heart to go the distance? They insist that they do, but remember, that is not the case. They make it all the way to Jerusalem. They proclaim him as king, but Holy Thursday comes around and they abandon him in the garden, and then many of these same people surround him, calling for his crucifixion. Followers of Christ have to be willing to pick up the burdens that come their way. And in the early church, when Luke wrote this gospel, they were facing persecution. They were facing death. They had to be willing to set aside the things that they held most important to grasp the one thing, the cross of Christ. Not an easy task then, nor is it an easy task now. Now, we don't face the same level of persecution as they did in the early church. We don't face the same level of persecution as they do in Syria or Afghanistan or Iraq or Northern Africa for those people who are Christians, where they are attacked on a daily basis. Our cross here is either more personalized or more of the distractions that we face, the things that weigh us down and keep us from following Christ. So, what's our cross and how do we bear it? Because the fact of the matter is, there are crosses that come our way that are often individualized. The loss of health, falling into the pattern of aging, slowing down, watching friends and family pass away. We face the cross of doubt and darkness, and we struggle. And the crosses each of us bear, we often don't know of. The people sitting next to you, the ones that you know and the ones you don't know, carry crosses that you may only glimpse a little bit. But the crosses are there, as is the promise of Christ. Because Christ promises that you do not carry your cross alone. He's there carrying it with you. And he carries it with you in the love of your family, friends, and the parishioners that surround you. The cross that you carry today is not carried alone. We share it with each other. Mother Teresa, who was just canonized today, is this wonderful saint of faith. But for 50 years, she struggled with darkness. She carried a heavy, heavy cross, and yet never gave up. You see, when she was called to faith, to follow Christ, and to start the Missionaries of Charity and to work in Calcutta, she heard clearly the voice of God calling her. But for 50 years, all she received was silence. She did not hear the voice again. She was like Abraham and Sarah crossing the desert, waiting to hear the promise of God fulfilled. Like Moses, who stood on the mountaintop dying as he watched the people enter the promised land. Like David, who was pursued by Saul, who wanted to kill him out in the wilderness. Like Daniel in the lion's den. And like all those early martyrs in the church, Mother Teresa faced the darkness of doubt. She bore a heavy, heavy cross that crippled her. And yet this less than 5 foot tall nun changed the world. Now we carry our own crosses, but like Mother Teresa, we can change the lives of people who sit next to us. We can help them bear the cross that they carry, and we can share with them the crosses that we have on our own shoulders. Because in so doing, we give them the chance to be Christ. To help us carry our cross is the most Christ-like thing that another person can do. Going the distance, having the resources to build the tower of faith in the midst of doubt and darkness, remembering that when there is darkness, and when we look into the shadow of that darkness, there's also light shining behind us if we dare to look. The promise of our faith is this: when Good Friday comes our way and the cross is laid on our shoulders, Easter is on the way. Easter is always around the corner. A sick child in the hospital, God is there. A spouse that we have lost, God is there. A friendship that has fallen apart, God is there. The darkness of doubt will eventually lead to the empty tomb of Easter morning. It's the promise of the gospel and the promise of faith. So, here's my call to us today. To be like Mother Teresa, and when the darkness of doubt comes, to lean into that darkness and continue to carry that cross. To reach out to those around us and share our crosses with them. Allow others to help you along the way. And finally, to be willing to pick up the cross of another, to share their load and not turn away. For in so doing, we embrace not just the cross, we embrace Easter. We embrace the gospel. We embrace the good news of resurrection. For where there is darkness, there is light. So God bless and go. Be the church for one another.